But for the moment, I want to understand what President Trump's message on Truth Social, the Prime Minister's response, and Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, when he addressed the media just a short while back, what was that all about? What's the bigger picture that emerges? Joining me on this India First special broadcast is Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, as always, welcome. We wanted to cut through the noise. We didn't want a political debate. We wanted to understand from an expert. We wanted to understand from you. You've been our man in Washington, D.C. What does President Trump's message actually mean? Does this actually end nearly 11 months of that economic standoff? Indian goods that faced an effective tariff of about 50%. When does it come down to 18%? And so far, it's only social media announcements, Ambassador. From a diplomat's perspective, is this a signal of intent? When does it actually happen on ground?
So, Gaurav, to my mind, there are two elements in the decision that has been taken. One with the now 18% tariffs rather than 50%, the competitive disadvantage that our exporters had faced compared to some other neighboring countries, that would be taken away. So, for example, Vietnam and Indonesia had 20% tariffs. We are facing 50% tariffs. Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan had 19% tariffs. So, and although overall Indian exports had gone up, although overall Indian exports to the US had gone up, but in certain sectors we had taken a hit in textiles, in leather, in gems and jewelry, marine products. So I think with the lower tariffs, those sectors, their difficulty we will be able to address. So that's one dimension.
Okay.
I think the second aspect is that because India stood its ground since July when US started raising the tariffs related to India, I think eventually the US realized and the world saw that on issues that matter to India, it stays firm on its position. And I
Interesting.
think two things triggered a different US approach. When the Prime Minister had gone to China for the SCO summit, the optics of his meeting with President Putin and President Xi there had played out in the US very negatively for President Trump because there was this whole argument of whether US was losing India and the whole relationship that had been built over the past 25 years. And Trump had himself posted on the social media that
Yeah,
is
they've lost
US
India.
losing India to China and Russia. And the second element was that the India EU FTA that has been done recently on the 27th of January. After that, manufacturers and economic units in the US, in Europe, would have an enhanced market access in India.
Okay.
And the American manufacturers and service sector, the technology people would be making the argument that why should they be disadvantaged compared to European entities? So I'm sure that also played out in the arguments in the US and in the administration. So with that, they took a decision that it was time for them to move away from the standoff that existed and work out a new set of tariffs related to India. So that's the positive thing. Of course,
Okay.
one can make the argument that before April last year, the tariffs on India, the average were 2.5%. Now it's 18%. To that extent, it's higher tariff level, but still lower than most other countries, although
Okay.
higher than on UK, where it is 10%, and
10%. Yes.
15% on Japan, South
South
Korea,
Korea.
and the European Union. But the
Okay, but let me understand this from you. So you're saying India stood firm. India stood firm and America came around. But President Trump seems to have linked and explicitly linked this tariff relief to India, stopping the purchase of Russian oil. New Delhi hasn't said anything to this effect on this commitment. So, in your view, is this binding on India that India will not buy Russian oil? There are some who say, will the Americans decide whether we buy oil from Russia or Venezuela?
So we have to see. The details have not come out, and the Indian government has not indicated that there is any commitment to completely stop buying Russian oil. In any case, the message from India consistently over the past couple of years has been that India will make purchases in the energy market based on the prices at which the products are available and based on looking at India's energy security. And Russian oil was available at discounted prices, cheaper than what we could get from elsewhere. And before the Trump administration, the US administration itself was asking India to buy more and more energy from Russia to keep the
Yes.
global prices stabilized. So I think now that Venezuelan oil is again entering the market, availability of oil will change, the price structures will change. So it's possible that just looking at competitive conditions, India may reduce what it was buying from Russia, but that doesn't mean that India will take it to zero. And on that, I
Okay.
have not seen any commitment from the Indian side.
And condition that, we are playing out some of the conditions based entirely on what has been put out on Truth Social by President Trump, or whatever the agriculture secretary may have said in the United States, and I'll come to that in just a moment. But there's also this talk about non-tariff barriers would be cut down to zero, and that India would invest $500 billion in purchases from the United States of America. Sir, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to the United States in February 2025, India was amongst the first of the bloc, hoping for a quick deal with the United States. At that time, the conversation was double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. So what's your reading of this? Is India to buy worth $500 billion or bilateral trade up to $500 billion?
So absolutely, but and at the same time, we know that President Trump, for his own political purposes, has from time to time made claims or projected figures and claims that have not really been based on facts. So I think he's playing his own political game. He wants to show to his base that through these trade agreements, he's able to achieve more than any other US president has done. But that's all that is not necessarily backed up by facts. So I think that we should
Okay.
just wait for the details of the agreement to emerge. And even with South Korea, for example, the US claimed that South Korea had agreed to buy more than invest more than $350 billion in the US. And the South Koreans later said they were not in a position to do that. And then with Japan, that Japan has agreed to invest $550 billion in the US. And we didn't see a similar matching commitment from the Japanese side. So I think we should just not take it at face value, let it play
Okay.
out, see it as a political projection that is being done, and wait for the details to emerge.
Okay, but Ambassador, should we take the US Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins at face value when there's conversation of India's massive farm markets being opened for US farmers, raising concerns that subsidized US farm produce would be sent to India? Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, of course, just a short while back said there's no question of compromising the interests of Indian farmers or very sensitive sectors like agriculture and dairy. Is there confusion on this issue, or should they not be taken at face value, the Americans, on this? Of course, there's a clarification from US that has just come in also.
So again, I would say we should not take it at face value. We should wait for the details to come out. From the reports that had appeared earlier in the public domain, it would appear that on a couple of items, India may be willing to allow more market access where there is shortage in India, but not open up the entire sector. And I think that is the kind of statement that has been also coming out from the Indian side, that the sensitive sectors would be protected. So I think at this stage, the best option would be to wait for the details to come out. And the very fact that for more than 6 months, India stood its ground.
Yes.
And there was a sense in India that we could live with the present situation if the US didn't walk back from the position it had taken. So there is no indication that there was a compulsion on India to make concessions that it had not agreed to before.
Okay. So, Ambassador, this movement on the trade deal comes just a couple of days after India concluded that deal with the European Union that Ursula von der Leyen at Davos had described as the mother of all deals. There are commentators who are saying that India perhaps is hedging between Washington, D.C. and Brussels to reduce the geopolitical risk. There are also those who say that India is more keen on a multipolar world, does not want American pressure. Then there are those who are arguing that this is a deep reset in India-US ties. And India is now firmly back in the US economic orbit. Would you agree with that argument?
I would not go that far because, with the action that US has taken, it has revived in India once again a sense that US can be a coercive and unreliable partner. For 25 years since 2000, both countries had made a determined effort to consolidate the relationship, build more trust in the partnership. Now, here, President Trump suddenly took two actions: one, reciprocal tariffs of 25%, and an additional 25% related to Russian oil purchases, when China was buying more Russian oil than India was doing, but no action against China. And Europe
True.
was buying more from Russia overall than India was buying oil, and no action against Europe on that account. So it has revived the sense that US can be unreliable, can be coercive at times. So the argument would be that certainly you should deepen the partnership with the US. It's an important country, it's a powerful country, it's the largest economy globally, largest consumer market. But even as you do that, you must hedge more. You must diversify
Hedge
more
more.
so that you do not give US coercive power over you. So I would say that with what has happened now, clearly the effort can continue to deepen the partnership in US different areas, technology areas where it works for India. But I think the effort at diversification will continue, and one can project that there would be enhanced focus on deepening the economic partnership with Europe in the coming period, because Europe itself is struggling about how to define their relationship with the US. And there is an argument in
Absolutely.
Europe that they should build now more autonomous capacity vis-a-vis the United States, given the kind of policy US has shown over the past year or so.
Perhaps with those agreements being inked with EU, more manufacturing and high-end defense manufacturing, or that could shift to India. Ambassador Singh, for joining me here on India First. As always, sir, many thanks.